It is April 20th, the day of the 2026 Boston Marathon. It is 45 degrees Fahrenheit, 7 Celsius outside with a nice tailwind aiding the runners. We may be in for some fast times. Despite being home to some of the premier marathon courses and some incredible track runners, the United States has struggled to produce elite talent in the premier distance event. The current American record is a 2:04:43 set by Conor Mantz. Perhaps someone running here can bring the US into a new era. Will someone break the national record? Well, maybe things are about to change. So who is this guy? Charles Hicks is a 24-year-old runner out of Stanford. At the end of his first year as a pro, he ran times of 13:09 for the 5,000 meters and 27:33 for the 10,000. And while these are some good times, they were not good enough to make the Paris Olympic team. And so faced with the choice between chasing a gap on the track where he struggled to hit top speeds or moving to the roads where he was a more natural fit, Charles decided to make an early career jump to the marathon. He made his debut in New York in November 2025 with a 2:09:59, good for 6th place. And at Boston, he has set a time of 2:04:35, the second fastest of all time by an American, only behind 31-year-old Zuhair Talbi, who ran a 2:03:45. Charles running a 2:04 so early in his career sets a bright path ahead for American marathoning. But you also wonder why, in a country of 350 million with access to the best sports science in the world, why it took so long to get these types of times. Part of the reason why the United States struggles to produce top-tier marathoners is that there are other, more lucrative pathways for an athlete to choose from. If you're a physically gifted athlete and you see NBA or NFL players signing 9-figure contracts, the glory would seem to be found in a basketball or football career as opposed to long-distance running. Just like how the NFL poaches track phenoms like Tyreek Hill to become wide receiver, the money and the glory for an American athlete is not in the marathon, at least not yet. You compare this to the East African countries, running is the prize. Young Ethiopian or Kenyan athletes, they see their elders setting records and dominating in the long distances, and so the youth can see a direct pathway to success. When you combine running culture, altitude, and perhaps some genetic predispositions, it creates a machine that converts highly ambitious East African youth into elite marathoners. But Charles has made an early dedication to the marathon. What does he need to do to compete at the highest levels? First, you need the mileage. Those 115-mile or 185-kilometer weeks aren't going to run themselves. This type of mileage is only possible after years of slow progression. If you ramp up too quickly, your body won't be able to take the load, and so getting to 115 is a multi-year project. Next, we have the altitude. East African marathoners spend much of their time at high altitude, and that low-pressure environment leads to positive results. Let's see if we can replicate this in a simulated environment.
Whether I quit the sport or not.
2.5%
Yeah.
is outside of our range of error. So that means that that's
Like a real change,
real main
significant
effect.
change, not just
Yeah,
measurement
not just
variability.
measurement error.
Over time, this pressurized environment pushes the body to produce the EPO hormone, which tells bone marrow to produce more red blood cells. More red blood cells means more hemoglobin to carry oxygen to working muscles. Now, the low oxygen availability at high altitude makes it harder to train intensely. And so one of the benefits of a simulated pressurized environment is you can live and sleep in the tent, but when time comes to train, you're right next to the lower altitude, removing the need for a burdensome commute up and downhill. A commonly overlooked deficiency among runners stems from not getting enough iron. When your running performance starts to suffer from fatigue or shortness of breath, it's hard to nail the culprit in the same way that you might be able to with a hamstring injury. Elite runners need to get enough iron, but this is doubly true if they're spending time in an altitude environment. Red blood cell production is only useful for oxygenation if it has hemoglobin, and hemoglobin needs iron. So let's do a recap. If you're Charles Hicks, what are some of the things you need to compete at the highest level? First of all, you need mileage. The mileage gives your body the endurance needed to run 26 miles at a sub 5-minute pace without breaking down. And so mileage plus some necessary threshold work is at the foundation of this. But there's this temptation to think that the answer to everything is more miles or more intensity. At this stage, athletes putting in maximum effort towards their training is already a baseline expectation. And in fact, they have to be aware that if they add more miles than their body can handle, then they can ruin everything by getting injured. And so if you're looking for those extra percentage increases to your performance, you have to expand beyond training to other areas. Living at altitude conditions, tracking your iron status, and then we can also add rotating through different shoes and surface types, as each shoe or surface type targets different muscles, and you want a healthy balance. And so what it means to be a marathon runner at this level is putting every part of your life under a microscope to see what can be tweaked to get a bit better performance down the road. And yet, even still, things can go wrong. Today is March 1st, the day of the 2026 USA Half Marathon Championships in Atlanta. We're 7 weeks out from Boston, and this will be the last big opportunity to assess Charles's fitness during his build. The goal is a first place finish, and hopefully even a sub 61 minute time. Within the early miles, Wesley Kiptoo and Hillary Bohr make a move, and Charles opts for a more conservative approach. The race progresses, but Kiptoo and Bohr don't gas out. Instead, they keep trucking, and Charles is never able to close the gap. Charles ends up with the 4th place finish in 62:10. The goal was to win. This is the last major test before Boston, and it seems like things aren't working. A marathon build is so much more than the physical toll it takes on your body. One of the toughest challenges for an athlete is knowing what to do when things don't go well. And it's times like this, after a subpar performance in his last real test before Boston, that Charles needs to keep it together. And he seems to be doing that pretty well. I rely on the confidence that I will navigate my failure points more effectively than my competition. We will encounter similar obstacles, just at different times. They are not setbacks, just part of the job. And so the 115-mile weeks would resume, and the adjustments would continue. As Boston drew closer, Charles would change his sleep cycle to adjust to Eastern Standard Time 3 hours ahead, and he even cut off voluntary contact to reduce his chances of getting sick. And so Boston comes, and the runners are at the line. Whatever happens here will be the finale of everything before, good and bad. The gun goes off, and the runners go out flying. Charles runs a disciplined pace, and when the hills come in the latter half, he makes a move by himself and finishes with a 2:04. What stands out to me about Charles Hicks's career thus far is how effective he seems to be in navigating the tough decisions that trip many other athletes up. He decided early on to cut his losses on the track and move to where he felt more comfortable. He recognizes that injury prevention is something that you can control instead of just blaming luck. So many athletes at this level, they fall victim to overtraining, where their solution to every failure is more miles or more intensity. And this isn't to say that 115 miles isn't a lot. It certainly is. But Charles has managed to stay healthy because he effectively navigates that trade-off between maximizing your potential and mitigating your potential for injury. I've always felt that the United States has too much talent and resources to not be able to produce top-tier runners to compete with the East African powerhouses, and Charles Hicks might be the talent to lead the country to a podium finish in the Olympics. I know that sounds crazy, but it's not crazy to me. I think he has what it takes. And so I can't wait to see what's in store for him, and I know his story is yet to be written. Because you know what they say, life isn't a sprint. It's a marathon.